This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Authority 480 herbicide from FMC. Authority 480 herbicide provides extended activity on the toughest weeds like kochia, wild buckwheat, cleavers, Russian thistle, and many more. See your local retailer today for more information.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Today, special treat, no Friday issues panel today. Kelvin and Lindsay get the day off. But I got a special treat for you because we are in Red Deer, Alberta. Snowy, finally a little bit of moisture on the ground. We could definitely use a lot more. But we're here today with Cargill Marketsense and about 250 of some of their top customers. And we're talking about the markets today. We're going to dive into renewable diesel and the opportunity for biofuels in Western Canada. And what is this thing called the CFR? We have a CFR. It's a rodeo, but there is another meaning for this acronym as well. And it's a liberal policy, but there's a lot of opportunity here for the Canadian grower. We'll be joined by Broschinski. He's with Cargill Marketsense, and he's going to be talking about the clean fuel regulation. We'll also be joined by Marcus Weidler and Ben Girard from Cargill Marketsense to talk about what does all this mean for the farmer customer? What does it actually mean for Cargill? Are there going to be differences in the trade flows? Are there going to be differences in the way that grain is actually transported across the Western Canadian prairies? And then we've got three farmers from Alberta that have really stepped up here to join us. We're going to get their reaction to all of this as well. We got Kevin Schmidt, Allan Jones, and Kent Wierenga. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Looking forward to all three of them to be here with us today. So, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. You are also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Okay, we've talked about renewable diesel quite a bit here on RealAg Radio in the past, and you've heard me say I find significant differences in how farmers talk and think about biofuels in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba compared to other areas of North America. Specifically, if we were to contrast how people feel in Red Deer about biofuels and compare that to how people feel in Iowa about biofuels, there are some really, really drastic differences. And Real Agri Studies in January surveyed farmers on a bunch of different policies and how do farmers feel about them. Will they be positive on my farm or will they be negative on my farm? Canadian farmers were actually neutral on the clean fuel regulation. Right down the middle. They were like a zero. Okay? -2 being negative, +2 being the most positive. They were right at a zero. So clearly there's some convincing for the Canadian farm population still yet to come. As I mentioned, many growers, audience members that talk to me, they view the CFR as, the Liberal Party did it, therefore it can't be a good thing. I would also be a little bit critical of the current government in terms of how they have communicated the benefits, just to sort of assumed that farmers would be like, this is going to be great. Here's the opportunities. Renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, sometimes called SAF, are major opportunities for canola demand. Canola's, we've heard, for those in the audience, you heard this before lunch, canola is preferential to soybeans from a crusher standpoint. Way more productive. This is an example where we have an advantage over growers in Eastern Canada and growers south of the border, right? We are the canola producing nation for for spring varieties. Renewable diesel demand is also a massive hedge and diversification away from having to rely on some of our export markets. Honestly, the one that comes to mind the most is China. The question is, what the heck are we going to do with all the meal? Right? There's going to be a lot of canola meal that we have to deal with, and we'll ask some of our panelists today about that. So without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to bring Ed Broschinski on the stage, and we're going to break down the CFR and what it means to Western Canadian agriculture when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
We're joined right now by Philip Korzak. He is the Director of Sales for Western Canada for Vaderstad, based out of Saskatchewan. If somebody's never had a seed hawk in the field before, why would you look at purchasing one?
Really, one of the keys that has been to our success that's lasted so long is our dual knife seed and fertilizer system. We do believe that we are the most accurate seeding tool in the market for seed placement. And the key component, not only with that seed placement, is also the fertilizer location. But we really feel that the dual knife system with the separation horizontally and vertically is really what's going to ultimately give that crop, especially a small seeded crop and high value crop like canola, easy access to those nutrients very early on and quick emergence. But equally important with that quick emergence is the even emergence.
If somebody wants more information on Vaderstad, how do they find it, Philip?
You know what? You can go to our website. It's very simple. It's just www.vaderstad.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Cargill Marketsense. You can find out more by going to cargillag.ca/marketsense. We are in Red Deer, Alberta here today, having a lot of fun with a bunch of Marketsense customers, actually a full room of Marketsense customers. And we're breaking down renewable diesel, SAF. There's lots to chat about here. Joining us right now is Ed Broschinski. And Ed, what do you do at Cargill?
I am, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Pleasure to meet you.
How have we not met before?
One time I saw you. I've seen you, but finally get a chance to be on the show is great. So thanks for the opportunity. I am the lead market analyst for Cargill's Marketsense program. It's a consulting program offered to farmers in Canada, and our mission, our job, is to help farmers make better decisions. Yep. And to make sure they feel confident in their grain marketing decisions and their operation.
I like what you did, a market update earlier on wheat and canola, and the strategy part, you talked about protecting the castle. I thought that was a really good description of where we are right now in the marketing cycle. Mm-hmm. Just for the people that didn't hear that presentation, what does that actually mean?
Defend the castle is something that, over the past 2-3 years, we've had a lot of opportunity, a lot of growth in the Canadian agriculture. The farmers' balance sheets have expanded with higher commodity prices. It's been really great. We've built a lot of wealth, across Canada in agriculture, and now it's time to hold on to that, right? Because we know markets are volatile. Markets give and take away. And right now, I think we're entering a stage where we want to defend that wealth and defend the castle that we've built.
It's kind of like live to fight another day.
Yes, exactly.
That's how my dad would put it. Okay, we've been talking about we're going to talk a lot about renewable diesel here in SAF. So backstopping all of this, I would maybe put, is the CFR, the Clean Fuel Regulation. What exactly is this policy, and what is it doing for the market?
So the clean fuel regulation is a federal policy that is mandating the blending of biofuels into the petroleum fuel supply. There's different percentages that are being mandated, but the average federal percentage is 2% into the diesel supply chain and 5% of blending of biofuels into the into the gasoline supply chain. You've got different jurisdictions with also provincial mandates as well. But the clean fuel regulation from the federal government is 2% into diesel and 5% into gasoline.
And this isn't the CFR is unique to Canada. It's our policy, but other countries as well, like the U.S. Through the RFS, Europe, other countries are going down the same road, right? We're not off on an island, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. The global demand and the global production of biofuels is expanding at a pretty rapid pace. I mean, one of the most interesting things that we're seeing, of course, is in the United States, right? We're seeing demand for Canadian vegetable oil, canola oil, in the United States because of their own program that they've got going. So, it's affecting all countries around the world.
We got an audience here full of farmers. What does it mean for them?
What it means is a more diversified supply chain for the product that we grow here. It means also that the supply chain is in Canada able to provide build wealth within Canada, right? Instead of exporting the raw product and having others process that, we're going to be processing a lot more of that in Canada. And the really cool part about that is, I think, when you're selling your product and seeing that product processed in Canada, you get a better feel for who's on the other side of that supply chain, right? Rather than far-flung nations across the earth. Yeah,
and you're looking at the demand flows for canola, where we are today. What does it look like out into the future? How does all this change? Like, how much of we can't grow more acres. Right, at least under today's current agronomics and genetics, we're kind of in a 1 in 3. Obviously, we do push that to 1 and 2 in some areas. Not advisable because we've seen some of the impacts from a blackleg and clubroot standpoint. So if we're going to have about the same amount of production or a slight increase in yield over time as the trend line yield increases, how much of that crop is going to go to biofuels?
What we probably see over the next several years, well, for instance, about 2 or 3 years ago, we had about 60-40 split. 60% of our seed went to export, 40% was crushed at home, and I think we'll see that flip. And we're already seeing that 60-40 split flip this year. We will see that those flows change, where less will go export and more will be crushed here, and that's how we'll supply that demand.
When you're talking to customers out in the countryside, do you sense excitement about this diversification of demand, apprehension? How would you describe it?
I think excitement might be a word that we could have used a year ago when prices were higher. I think everybody now is looking at it sideways and saying, well, I heard that it's supposed to be good, but why is the prices not higher?
Right, you told me that we're at this new normal, Ed. Ed, you did not say new normal, did you?
I don't think it was me that said that.
There was a few I would cringe every time I would interview a market analyst, and they would be like, oh yeah, like where we are today, this is the new normal. As soon as you hear somebody say that, run, because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
We're running lower now, right?
And I think the thing about markets, and they're so forward-looking, we want to bring that future state into the present, and so the market gets excited, and then it pulls back, and there still is a steady growth in demand. There's still a steady opportunity that we see, and markets are going to be volatile along the way. And at the end of the day, we see a long-term opportunity that's really exciting. And I think that when I explain that and when we talk through that with farmers, and then they see, oh yeah, this is actually something that's really good over the long term and is going to benefit me and my family.
Yeah, I guess when we look at what happened with some of the non-tariff trade barriers and some of the things that we have gone through, in particular like with China, you can't just find another, people are like, well, we need to diversify our trade markets. Well, when you're dealing with a country with the buying power of China, you just can't, like, there's not a whole bunch of countries lining up that can buy that much. You need a volume of countries to backfill that kind of demand. This is really an opportunity. This is a trade diversification hedge, really, and processing it here at home. I'm not sure that is discussed enough.
One of the diversification pieces that I find really interesting as an economist is a structural problem with the current fuel supply chain, and it's due to something known as the 3-2-1 crack spread.
Oh.
And the idea there is, on average, for every 3 barrels of petroleum crude oil, you get 2 barrels of gasoline and 1 barrel of diesel. Now, the problem is that when you have any kind of dislocation in the demand for gasoline, for instance, perhaps electric cars, through COVID, there was a shutdown of the economy. We saw diesel or gasoline demand plummet. When they throttled production of gasoline, the structural problem was they also throttled production of diesel, and we ran into a diesel shortage. With these the biofuel production capacity, we don't run into structural problems with overproducing gasoline and underproducing diesel. We can produce just diesel and meet that demand exactly where it is, and we don't have the structural instability in the fuel supply chain. So diversification, yes. We see a better, more robust fuel supply chain because of this.
Is there any and if this is outside your wheelhouse, just let me know, but do you see any political risk? I mentioned this is a current government policy, the CFR. We've heard the Conservatives talking about it as a second carbon tax. Is there any political risk here that the goalposts kind of move if we were to have a change in government?
I mean, we don't know exactly what new policies are going to come in Canada or around the world. What we do know is that there's momentum behind this shift, right? And there's actual economic benefits to having a more diversified fuel supply chain. So there is export opportunities, for instance, that have been talked about into other countries. So even if there's any kind of changes in Canada, we have other opportunities around the world. But at the end of the day, I see momentum, right? And where there's momentum, I think there's opportunity there.
Great stuff. Well, I really appreciate you joining us. Thanks for the market update earlier. It was fantastic. We definitely got to do an interview with you, talk about the markets before I leave here today. So Ed Broschinski, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shaun.
Okay, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to hear from Marcus Weidler, and we've also got Ben Girard. They'll be with us when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, brought to you today by Cargill Marketsense.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Joining me on the line is Barry Mann. He's the Vice President of Investor Relations for Genesis Fertilizers, and we're talking about an exciting project.
So the project is essentially bringing farmers together to create a vertically integrated fertilizer company based on the prairies, and it's to give farmers the opportunity to take advantage of the abundant supply that we have of natural gas, create our own nitrogen fertilizer from that, and deliver direct to the farm.
Investing in this project, a farmer that does, they're still going to pay market price for the product, but they're going to see a benefit in the payback after.
Yeah, I think you've pretty well summarized it. With the vertical integration, we're not out to bust the market. It's going to join the market. So yeah, we'll be selling it at market price, but because the farmers are the owners, because they're the shareholders, they just also are going to happen to be the customer. Based on the amount of fertilizer that they use on their farm, the average farmer is taking an ownership stake in the project based on those tons, so that at the end of the day, those profits come back to the farm.
Oh boy, we got a great crowd here today in Red Deer, Alberta. A very rambunctious bunch here, the Cargill Marketsense customers, and we're having a great time talking about the future of biofuels in Western Canada, what it means for the farmer, as well as for a company like Cargill and how they're building a real business around all of this structure. Okay, let's dig in here a little bit more. We got Marcus Weidler, and we're also joined by Ben Girard. Hey guys, thanks for joining me.
Hey, good afternoon.
All right, thanks for having us.
Yeah, okay. So, Marcus, earlier we heard about, and the customers here got a bit of a leg up. They heard about Cargill Power Canola earlier. Tell the RealAg Radio audience out there across the region, what exactly is this?
So, Cargill Power Canola is our answer to the opportunity of renewable fuels, as I already explained from the CFR regulations, so the clean fuel regulations, and opening up a new opportunity for growers here for their canola. That means so far what we had was obviously canola was crushed going into the food chain. Now we have a second leg to stand on, and this is where Power Canola comes in, and to produce additional value within the local growing community, with local farmer community, and within the Canadian business. Because what we are not doing is obviously exporting canola to other markets where it's then crushed and then also used in many cases for renewable fuel. No, we keep the value creation within the country, we keep the value creation within the local farming communities, and for this, of course, our company is investing heavily into the infrastructure to enable this opportunity for the Canadian grower community.
So why the program? If canola is going into renewable diesel, into one of the Cargill facilities for that purpose, is it priced differently, or like what's the difference to the grower?
So there will be, and of course this is now confidential, therefore I cannot go into the details.
It's just you and me, you can tell us.
And the millions of people on the radio. No. So the program will launch in early March, and then we will disclose all the details. But what I can say, it will be very interesting for the growing community to really look at this Cargill Power Canola program.
Cool stuff. Okay. So Ben, I sort of maybe got ahead of myself. I said earlier that we really can't expand the canola acre in Western Canada. Am I correct? Or when you're doing you guys are doing all the modeling and looking at the opportunity here for renewable diesel, do you see an increase in the canola acre?
Yeah, I think we've already seen some increase in canola acres over the years that's been coupled with increases in yield. So overall supply of canola in Canada and here in Alberta have increased over the years.
Do we have, like, when I'm in the U.S., they're talking about renewable diesel too. Okay, so they're also excited. We've got the majority of the acres are in North Dakota. There is talk of expansion, basically like Nebraska north through the PNW, where they're also mainly in the PNW. A lot of it's winters. Is there a chance we pull U.S. canola into Canada too? Like, can we produce enough canola in Canada for all this demand? Is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think right now we have adequate supplies of canola for both the food supply chain as well as for renewable fuels. So we do have a very diverse growing area here in Alberta. We have quite a wide geography, and we also have great farming practices to support that. So we're confident right now that we do have the production for both fuel as well as the food supply chain through exports and some of the domestic outlets.
I had somebody tell me one time, an executive in the grain industry, and he had kind of we were having a beer, and he had made an offhanded comment where he said the potential for, he was trying to provide context to what the demand could be here for renewable diesel. And he said, if you look at the state of California alone, we could end up exporting the entire Canadian canola crop just to fulfill the demand in California. And I don't know if he was being hyperbolic or what, but it was sort of like, I've never forgot that, because California is one of the states that is really leading in this charge when it comes to things like the use of renewable diesel.
Yeah, well, I think in addition to that, what we're seeing is a global trend that way. So we're seeing increased demand out of the states like California, for example, but we're also seeing in areas around transportation, for trucking around the world, as well as for aviation in the future. Like the trend is up. and has been up for a number of years already. So we're looking at that continuing for the foreseeable future and a long way into the future.
Well, as long as Elon Musk doesn't try to sabotage us, there's a big opportunity here. So, Marcus, you showed earlier, like, with electrification, a lot of in the light duty vehicles or light passenger vehicles, electrification has a fit, and the trend is going that way. And we have technology in the current environment, although demand has really slowed in that market too. We don't need to get into that. But when we're talking about biofuels, it's really in that long haul trucking, sustainable aviation fuel. That's really the market fit here, correct?
Yes, that's the long game. Absolutely. This is where the demand will persist. You can replace internal combustion engines in, I would say, any type of land vehicle, longer term, but nobody has shown me how you're going to replace a jet engine, and we are still able to cross an ocean. So from this perspective, you are spot on. The longer term demand will be in trucking, and then in the area of sustainable aviation fuel. There are other initiatives. The key word here is e-fuels, but they are, from a cost perspective, astronomical. And someone has to show me the economics to make that work. There are airlines in this world today that use sustainable aviation fuel, still expensive than traditional fuel, but they make it work. So I'm very confident to see it within the next 10, 15 years, a strong shift towards that one. In addition to that, we have a lot of commitments from the airlines to get net zero around 2030, 2035, whatever you want. And they're actively working on that. So I'm not worried at the demand side for 1 second.
Yeah. Is anybody in the audience here volunteering for that very first flight where they tried an electric jet engine across the ocean? Anybody doing that? No, nobody is. Okay, me neither. when you're in Europe and you, like when I was in the Frankfurt airport in November, they've got big fuel tanks like for the airlines, like those huge tanks, and they say SAF on them, right? So yeah, some of this is being used already. Now, one of the questions I have is how this changes the logistics of grain flow. Traditionally, we grow crops and we get them to the coast. Okay, grain goes out. Well, with some of the substantial investments in some of the crush facilities, Cargill being one of them, there's some major projects around Regina. What happens with grain transport? Are we going to have to tell the railroads that they're going to haul by rail canola from, say, Red Deer to Regina? Like, what is that? That's totally different because that's not how it's worked. So what happens here?
You're spot on. There will be more domestic transport of grain, and it actually happened today already. So talking about Camrose as an example, our crush plant, we get in Camrose grain by rail from Manitoba and from Saskatchewan. And we also get grain from the peas into this crush plant. This will intensify. On the flip side, the transport to the coast will certainly going down. So we will have those transports. On the rail, of course, what you will see is somewhere the meal has to go and the oil has to go. So that means what we will see is a higher frequency of trains with canola meal pellets going to the coast or to other areas. For example, in the US, you can go to California when you think about where the canola meal is primarily used as dairy right now.
Right, yeah. The U.S. dairy industry is a substantial user of Canadian canola meal, for sure. Actually, when you go to the World Dairy Expo, there's big advertisements. When I've been there in the past, in Madison, Wisconsin, there's big advertisements for using Canadian canola meal in your dairy ration. And also with that change in terms of lightening of the reliance on having to ship canola by rail to the coast, that actually could be a benefit for other crops like, say, wheat, where we're not trying to force so much down the throat of the railways in terms of being having to be so reliant on them to get stuff to the coast.
Yeah, for sure. We're bringing in increased domestic demand, which does decrease to some degree reliance on the railways. Obviously, we're still anticipating pretty massive exports as well. In some cases, that will shift in the canola side of things, but we continue to export many other commodities to the coast by rail as well. So we're going to continue to see that in the future. There will be both that will be going on at any one time. But when you look at the canola specifically, there will be more of that will be retained for domestic end use rather than going to exports through the terminals.
Well, I really appreciate the insight. Marcus, thanks a lot for joining us here today.
Thank you.
And Ben, all the best, man. Great to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Shaun.
Okay, we've heard from the experts from Cargill. Now we're going to bring up the farmers and get their perspectives on how all of this impacts them, as well find out how they're thinking about the 2024 crop. We're inching a little bit closer with every day to being able to put some seeds in the ground. There's snow outside, but we got to be patient, but it's coming faster than we always like to admit. You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Cargill Marketsense.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Whether you're a rookie soybean grower or a seasoned vet, the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com has exactly what you need to stay in the game. The latest research and the best agronomic advice from industry experts, along with local and global market coverage on demand, anywhere, anytime. Make this growing season your best growing season with the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com.
And we're back here on RealAg Radio, broadcasting today from the Cargill Marketsense event. It's called Think Tank, and it is great to be a part of it here today. We've been focusing on renewable diesel, the CFR, biofuels, the opportunity when it comes to this whole initiative and the role that Cargill plays in it. But honestly, more importantly, the impact that this potentially has on the farmer and farmer profitability. We've got three farmers that have joined us here today. They're very eager to share their opinions, I might add, and looking forward to hearing what those opinions are. So joining us first, it is Kevin Schmidt. Kevin, how's it going?
Good.
Okay, so tell us about the farm.
Well, we farm outside of Wetaskiwin, and we are a mixed farming operation. We have a cattle operation as well as the grain sector. It's a family-run operation, and definitely sustainability is one of the things, or the key interest of our farm. We are the third generation farmer with the fourth generation now starting in on it, and we like to look to the future, to the bright side.
I've been through Wetaskiwin many times. So little known fact, it was not an illustrious career, but I played for the Camrose Kodiaks in their very first year, and so I drove through Wetaskiwin all the time. It was a one-year career. It wasn't that great. But I've been through, we used to call it the Wonka Tonk. Is that what they still call it?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. Maybe that was just a me thing. Okay. Also joining us is Allan Jones. Allan, where do you farm? And tell us a little bit about, tell us about the farm.
Yeah, well, we're a family farm from Balzac. Well, it's got swallowed up by a city of Calgary. And
you pretty much farm in the city of Calgary.
We're a little north of Calgary and east, but yeah, we're a mixed farm as well. We run some cattle and grain, and family farm, like I say, and looking to farm transition, and seeing how that's going to play out with the boys that are keen on farming.
How close is the city of Calgary to you?
We're about 8 miles east of the number 2 highway, so maybe a 15-minute drive to the Calgary airport now with all the lights.
When you think of Allan, think of cha-ching.
Yeah, it does cost a lot.
Wasn't what I was talking about. Okay. Also joining us here is Kent Wierenga. Kent, how's it going? Tell us about your farm and where you're located.
Farm Bard, Westlock area. Family farm. Farm with my dad and 2 other brothers. But yeah, just strictly grain farm. 3rd generation. Hopefully maybe a 4th. I don't know. But yeah, no, strictly grain farm by Barhead.
Yeah. Did any of the 3 of you have livestock at one time?
We currently do, yes.
Oh, you still do? Oh, okay.
And we still have livestock as well, and I've had them for a long time there. Since probably 1905 we had registered Hereford cattle.
Wow.
Yeah, no, we had cattle and hogs up until it's about 15 years ago now, probably.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. Things are finally looking better. The mixed farm looks a lot better today from a cattle perspective than it did a number of years ago. So, okay, let's dig in here. We've been hearing about the CFR, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel here throughout the day. I guess, Kevin, let's start with you. What's your reaction to what you've heard here today? What's your thoughts?
Well, it's kind of mixed, I guess. First of all, I am always of the belief that the more value added that we can do to our commodities, whether it be grain or beef, which we're involved in, domestically, we can create a better market here, and it always is cheaper to from the freight perspective to transport something that is a finished product, right?
Yeah.
If you're sending canola, raw canola versus canola oil, well, it's better off. We heard this morning about it creating jobs. Yes, that is true. But on the other side, I think we all are aware of the labor issues here in Alberta, and that we are looking always for workers. So that would be one side of the thing. The other thing is that in the end, what does it have for the actual farm? What does it provide? We heard here that it is going to flip from 40% crush to 60% crush locally, which is good. But we never heard really, and maybe Marcus, you didn't say anything about that. But what the premiums are going to be for the farm in the end, to see is it adding a value? Obviously, it's going to cost the fuel companies, they could be Husky or whoever, to add this 2% on diesel into the fuel. Will it? There's a cost involved with that, and then on the flip side, the fuel goes up, so it's a double-edged sword for the farmers.
So you just hit on, not to interrupt you,
yeah.
Good thoughts. You just hit on what I hear the most from Western Canadian growers, which is one of the things I never hear about in Iowa. In Iowa, they always talk about demand for corn. And in Western Canada, one of the very first things that people bring up all the time is, how much more is my fuel going to cost? It's an interesting sort of dynamic. So, Allan, what's your reaction to kind of what you heard today?
Well, I see it as a positive. We haven't heard the numbers on how much value it can add at the farm level, so that's a question that we'll have to find the answer to. If it's possible to create added value, though, in a time like we have with, I remember I was a younger fella in the 1970s, at the end of the 70s, and they were roaring. And it came into the 80s, and that decade was pretty tough. And I'm hoping this isn't a replay of what's happened.
You are understating that.
So I guess at the end of the day, if it can truly add value at the farm level, and if it can truly add value to Cargill, and if it can truly add value to society, then it's a win-win.
Yeah. Okay. Good thoughts. Kent, how about you?
I guess kind of mixed reaction to it. I mean, as a farm, we're always looking for new opportunities to better the farm. The one thing that always I always think about when you hear about, sustainable and all that, it all comes back to, I think it all comes back to government mandates. And as soon as government is involved, I always have a little bit of skepticism. They can say all they want. This is what we want. This is what we want. But it has to happen kind of worldwide, which maybe this is, because otherwise, you said it earlier, we're caught here on an island. Because inevitably, I think it's going to be a more expensive product. No, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I just always worry about when something is driven by a government mandate, is it actually sustainable, or is it just sustainable until the government says it's not? That's what comes to my mind right away. But
yeah, and when we think about we think about demand for corn. When they implemented the renewable fuel standard in the U.S., when George would be Bush 43, when he did that, right? That has been had a substantial impact on corn demand. When you have 40% of the corn of the 90 million acres in the U.S. being used for ethanol crush, that's significant. So, and we have benefited from, if you want to call it government interference, we have benefited from that government policy driving corn demand, which has pushed prices higher. If that RFS went away tomorrow, that corn chart for December looks a lot uglier than she does here today. So, okay, we've got more to discuss on this when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio. We got three farmers, Kevin, Allan, and Kent, and we'll be right back. Brought to you by Cargill Marketsense.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
This crowd here in Red Deer is fantastic. Okay, welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host. Today's show is brought to you by Cargill Marketsense. We're at their Think Tank event in Red Deer, Alberta. We'll also be at the Saskatoon event coming up in March, which I'm really looking forward to as well. So we've got a farmer panel here. We're diving into some of the issues. We've got Kevin Schmidt, Allan Jones, and Kent Wierenga, all from Alberta, sharing some of their perspectives. So, okay, let's talk about 2024 a little bit. And Kent, let's start with you. I showed the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index earlier. Farmers across the country are feeling a little bit down. But what I keep on hearing from some farmers is, you know what? You got to be positive. You got to be optimistic in this industry. But we know this. The reality is the margins are a little bit tighter. I think people are going to have to really be paying attention to their cost of production and trying to maximize some of their marketing opportunities. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Margins are going to be, in my mind, a lot tighter, or they're going to be tighter, which maybe causes for a little bit of pessimism. But looking back, like if I look back in previous years, other than, the outliers are the last couple of years where margins were exceptionally high. We're getting back to, if everything plays out the way it is, at least on our farm, it's kind of back to our more traditional margins from a few years ago. So, I guess deal with it as it comes and make decisions accordingly.
Allan, I was with some Ontario growers on Tuesday night. We were down at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky, and we were at a private function. I was giving a presentation, and one of the growers said to me, we're going to see a real separation here, the wheat and the chaff. Growers that have managed their profits well over the past 3-5 years versus the ones that didn't. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's up to us to mitigate the risks the best we can. And I think it's wise to reassess the debt. The cost of money looks like it's going to be a real threat. The asset values have been high. We came off record high prices in the last couple of years. And if you're looking at sustainability on the farm, it comes back to basics like knowing your costs, knowing how to control the costs, and to try and do, a better job of marketing. And I guess we're here today because there's an opportunity to do that with Cargill as well. And this is for you, Marty. We're going to have some more serious discussions, apparently, but try and figure out how to make this thing work better.
Yeah, well, that's, when I talked earlier, before we started the radio show here, we were talking about confidence in marketing plan. I think that kind of fits into that, is trying to tap into the resources so you can build your confidence what your marketing plan is going to look like. Kent, what's your outlook here on 24 as you look at your crop budgets and crop plan?
Well, it definitely, like everybody else, profit margins are going to be very slim way it looks from the grain sector. I can say we're fortunate that we have the cattle sector. Being on a mixed farm that way, it always was that usually one carries the other one through, and the grain sector was carrying the cattle for the past years, so I'm hoping that the cattle will carry the grain on some of this. However, I think it is, I got to agree with Allan here, risk management is one of the biggest key factors for farms, and I think we've been through this in the past years, that we have to address that. And on the grain side, I would like to definitely thank Cargill for the opportunity that we have to work with them. And Ed, your recommendations every morning, that is something that we take to heart very well, and we try to follow it. And so far, it's been working for us, and I'm very thankful for it.
Okay, so shed some light. You don't need to tell us all your secrets. So what are some of the things that you've been doing to manage risk? Because this has been a very, very volatile period, and you can see in our sentiment index how farmers feel about the direction of the market has been all over the place. And that's not a criticism. That's been the reality, because trying to make sense of it has been very, very difficult over the past 18, 24 months. Like when we, in 2021 in the fall is when the market started to go higher, right, Ed? Ed's nodding. And it was like a hockey stick, right? All of our American friends, you're starting to understand what I'm saying when I talk about hockey. But it was like a hockey stick. Anybody could market through that, right? Do I want to make money today or more in 2 weeks when the market's, a little bit higher, right? And that's how it was. It's not like that right now. So what has been some of your strategies of the marketing side to try to defend your castle, as Ed put it?
Well, I think one of the key things is that you know your cost of production. You know what you need out of it, and the second being, don't get caught up in a windstorm. When markets are good, we tend to lean to greed.
She's going higher, more. Baby.
It's going higher. It's going higher. I know there's guys that have said to me, "Oh, I'm not selling $14 canola no more because I got 24 last year." They might be selling 11, 9. Who knows? But anyhow, it's. We have to focus, or what we try to focus on is opportunities. And I have to think back, one farmer told me one time, an elderly gentleman, he said, for every disadvantages that you have, look at it very closely, because there's one advantage out there. And I think Ed, you maybe touched on it. There's maybe key little points here and there, and we have to be ready to pull the trigger when they come. And that's something that we really try to focus on and look forward, not backward. And we try to protect ourselves as far out as we possibly can, and that's helped us in the past.
So those are great thoughts, Kevin. Sorry, I called you Kent earlier. Kent, I think one of the things that growers are challenged with is sort of like the hindsight thing, right? Make a decision, sell a Super B of canola, and then watch the market for the next 3 months and evaluate that decision and kick the crap out of themselves about, I should have held on, or I shouldn't have, like, there's a lot of hindsight and really just make the decision, move on. How do you handle that?
I think the biggest way I handle that is it's like you said, know your cost of production and what you got into it. And if you're selling, I always just try to tell myself, if you're selling at a profit, you never go backwards selling at a profit. So if you sold at a profit, even if the market goes higher, I never try to think about it too much. I mean, so much the better if you got more to sell. Yeah. But like I say, you don't go backwards making profits. So I think the real key, especially now, is like you said, knowing your cost of production, and if you can lock in profits, and then I don't know. I don't think about it near as much as I used to now that I work with Cargill and on the. You got tools like the Farm Maximizer, so you know basically exactly where you're at. And maybe, used to be before I was maybe with Marketsense, always tried to hit the big home run, but now I just think about it totally different. Just try to lock in profit and take risk off the table, and once it's sold, it's sold. I mean, there is tools you can get back in if you figure you missed an opportunity, but for the most part, I just carry on.
Okay, to wrap up here, I want to ask you guys about your crop rotations quickly. Kevin, any changes to the crop rotation this year from an acre fluctuation standpoint?
Not really. We try to do a 1 and 3, so we follow that pretty precisely. So it's just usually one commodity will be a little better than the other one out there, we know, but it's not, if you're chasing the pendulum, you're going to miss it.
Allan, how about you?
Yeah, we'll stick to our rotations. With canola, we've been, I'd say, between 1 and 4 years and 1 and 3 years. We backed off a number of years ago when the market was higher. We pushed it, and I didn't like the result of that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we'll try and stick to our rotations evenly.
Yeah. Okay, Kent, how about you?
Same thing, just sticking to our rotation. Like you say, if you're trying to chase a market, usually you miss it anyway. So we'll just, we're in a heavy club root area, so we'll just stick to our usual rotations and see how it works out.
It's amazing because I always ask growers about changes to the crop rotation. Everybody says the same thing. They're saying is we stick to our rotations. Yet the acres are always different every year. It's such a strange phenomenon. I don't know how this happens, but it's very fascinating to me. I think sort of what Ed said earlier. I think we're going to see. It's kind of the common thought is canola and wheat acres lower than in 23. Okay, guys, this has been fantastic. Kevin, Allan, Kent, thank you for joining us here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Crowd's getting ahead of themselves because we got to wrap up here yet. I want to thank Cargill Marketsense for having us here today. Really, really do appreciate it. Encourage everybody, of course, to go to cargillag.ca/marketsense to find out more about Cargill Marketsense and their programs and how to contact an advisor. Ed's got these updates everyone's raving about. I got to check them out as well. We got to get Ed on the show more often, I think, to talk about the markets. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Of course, we'll chat again with you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Authority 480 Herbicide from FMC. Authority 480 Herbicide delivers outstanding control of the toughest broadleaf weeds in wheat, pulse crops, flax, mustard, and more. See your local retailer today for more information.